Welcome to Nobody's Madness. I'm your host, Nobody. So today we're going to talk about Psi Ritual. But first, let's start off with ritual. Usually ritual has spiritual connotations to it. You think of church or crazy occult rituals or devil worship rituals. But honestly, most of us have daily rituals. There's things that we do every day. And if we start off looking at these rituals that we do daily, it'll give us some idea of what Psi Ritual is for. Remember, Psi and magic are interchangeable if you missed the last couple videos. Um, so, what kinds of rituals do people have? You know, often there's morning rituals. People do a certain set of things in the morning. That's one version. There's rituals on the way to work. I have rituals I do at work, and by this I mean repetitive things that are done over and over in a similar fashion, and that's loosely what defines a ritual. We see it a lot with sports players. They have rituals, lucky objects, things that they need in place in order for them to perform. There's warm-up rituals that actors and actresses do. Singers do rituals to warm up. So these little things that we do, to some extent, bring order into our lives. They make things consistent. And typically, a ritual is either designed to increase the efficiency or focus that one has, or it's to allow the body to be autonomous. So I know when I wake up in the morning and I go through my morning ritual, my body just does its own thing. My conscious mind isn't really thinking about that. It's off on its own little journey in its own world. So while I'm doing all the things, brushing my teeth, doing my hair, washing my face, all that, uh, my mind is thinking of other things, or it's still sleeping. So sometimes rituals allow the body to continue doing something because it's been ritualized, it's been ingrained, it just becomes habit. There's a bit of a difference between habit and ritual, but we'll get into that later. Uh, so there's rituals that allow the mind to do one thing while the body does another. This is what I most commonly do when I work. I have things set, I do certain patterns at work, uh, one, to increase efficiency, and two, so that my body can do things and I have my mind to myself. My preferred types of work are more physical so that my body can do its job while my mind is my own. I get to think about whatever I want to think about. Driving to work is also somewhat ritualized because it's so repetitive. Uh, the other form of ritual is not just physical efficiency, but also mental efficiency, where instead of allowing the body to do one thing and the mind do something else, you're blending them together. Sports, martial arts, these physical aspects that require mental focus are a good example of the blending of the two. So if we're using ritual to streamline and perfect and it becomes a pattern because it's the most efficient way to do things, this gives us some insight and helping the mind to focus either on what the physical body is doing or allowing the physical body to do one thing while the mind is focusing on something else. These are two useful aspects of rituals that everybody does on a regular basis. Whether it's daily or weekly, you know, anything that's planned out ahead of time that you do regularly can essentially be called a ritual that we do. These rituals can also help when adapting to new situations because you have a certain set that you do for some things, and some of these ritual patterns are a little broader. So, like, let's say meeting new people, you have a certain way of going about meeting new people, a way of paying attention to them, noticing what they're wearing, in some cases, you know, judging them or not judging them, taking them at face value or looking for something deeper. Uh, this requires a broader range of ritual actions that are a little more general so that you can adapt to broader situations and If something is set in a way that you do it when something, and you can do it almost autonomously or with perfect focus, then when something else is thrown into the mix, it's easier to adapt because it's less chaotic. It's adding one piece of chaos to an ordered system, instead of your system is already in chaos and then you're just adding more on top of it. And then there's those that whose ritual is chaos, and they thrive in chaos, and that is another form of ritualization. But so if we accept that we do rituals on a regular basis, and what these rituals are designed for, how these rituals help us, and it just should only take a little bit of thinking throughout your day and how you act and behave to realize the extent of this ritualization in your everyday life, just as a normal human being doing normal, quote unquote, normal human being stuff. It should become prevalent or be easily brought to your attention. So going from that baseline, when we get into Psi Ritual, the purpose of it is to aid us in increasing our focus. We could call it increasing our energy field as well. But it's using everything that is at our disposal to increase focus and purpose. One of the biggest differences between Psi rituals and other rituals is that Psi rituals should at all times be done with purpose and thoughtfulness, even if it's just practicing to get a specific ritual under your belt. But all of these rituals, Psi rituals, are designed to give you control over your own mind and focus it in the direction that you want it to be focused, as opposed to what we are normally used to, whether we generally realize it, well, whether the general population realizes it or not, is we are being bombarded by what other people want, primarily producers and that drive towards consumption, consumerism. I've been thinking about how, people don't choose fads. Fads choose what we do. And that has to do with methods of manipulation, primarily in psychology, but psychology gets its root from Psi, or religion, or spirituality, or magic. When you travel back, the roots had always been there because it involves self-examination, analysis of the self and one's own mind, and in analyzing one's own mind, you can analyze other people's minds far better. When you understand yourself, it's easier to understand other people. So the methods used in just commercial psychology are designed to push you in the direction of their product, whether you want it or need it or not. We are taught to listen, to pay attention in our education system. And that ritual of sit down, shut up, and listen, while we kind of, shut things out and stare dazedly at the front of the classroom in a beta mind state, which is a step closer to a hypnotic state. It's a more suggestible state, which is the state that we're in when we're in class. And so we develop this ritual of just doing what we're told and accepting the information that's given to us. So then we start watching TV and we see commercials, and the commercials tell us what we want. So instead of just letting this flood of random information wash us back and forth, whichever direction, that mainstream media or society tells us to go, Psi Ritual is designed for you to find yourself and focus yourself on what you really want. And there's several different ways of doing this, and I will get more into specific types of Psi Ritual, their intention, how they should be performed. I will get into that, but Psi Ritual in and of itself, the purpose of it is to shut out all that noise, focus on yourself, discover yourself, what you want, what you feel you should be doing. Or not even what you want, I should say, to find out what you need as opposed to what you want. wants are very susceptible. What we need and what we want should be the same thing, but often what we want is not what we need, and what we need is not what we want. So there's usually a divide in our own mind which has multiple layers, and Psi Ritual helps align those layers of the mind so that we can wholeheartedly put forth our will to do something. Now, we hear about willpower. You need willpower to resist temptation. You need willpower to overcome obstacles. If you have two people of the same skill, the difference in the strength of their wills are going to determine who the victor is in a competition. You know, digging deep is, and accessing that force of will is what makes a good player of sports a great player. We hear about adrenaline and how people can lift cars off of injured children, and all kinds of crazy stories that revolve around sheer force of will. And everybody is in awe of sheer force of will. The purpose of Psi Ritual is to develop that force of will. And you can see those aspects of it in Mind Over Matter when it comes to martial arts. I know I access it a lot. I use it as a reference point frequently, but it's because for most people of the United States, the closest they get to truly spiritual ideas and what they can do is through the martial arts. So I will tend to reference that a lot, and then deviating from that slightly, you have sports, which are physical and require focus and willpower, and arts, which require imagination. So there's levels, all the way down to just sitting in a cubicle, completely miserable and unhappy, getting yelled at by your boss, and there we have kind of like the lowest level of our will versus our expression and ability to express our being and use our will to focus on what needs to be done. Now, Psi Ritual is designed to access different parts of the mind. There's that old saying that we only use 20% of our brains, or 10% or 15%, whatever that saying is. So I've had people, and I've come across it on the internet, the idea that is completely false, because we have to use our entire brain in order to function. Like, if we didn't use our whole brain all the time, we would die. And scientifically, this is true. This is accurate. That rigid idea of using 10 or 15% of our brain is inaccurate. It is not correct. However, if we change it from percent of our brain to percent of our potential brain power, it's a very different story. And we'll compare that by saying, right now I'm using all the muscles in my body. Well, at least 50% of them. I'm using, my muscles are fighting with gravity to make me remain in the seated position. So yes, I'm using my entire body right now. I'm breathing, heart's pumping, all of the things that your body needs to do to maintain a position. But you look at me, I'm pretty thin. Have I reached the maximum potential that my physical body could do? Am I as strong as I could be? Am I as healthy as I could be? Am I as fit as I could be? Or am I at like a 15% range of what the maximum human capacity could be for physical function? I would hope it's a little better than that, but I can't be entirely sure. Anyway, so if we compare the amount that the body is used at any given point in time, the physical body and the muscular structure, it's probably close to 90% at any given point. But does that mean that it is reaching its full potential? It does not. The brain is very much like a muscle. You have to exercise it. And sadly, there's not a lot of opportunity to exercise our brains. One of my preferred methods is problem-solving video games. puzzle games, things that challenge your mind and make you think outside of the box or think around the puzzle. It's probably one of the higher potentials until you get into the stronger sciences and mathematics, but even that can be somewhat mechanical. Computer engineering, I don't have a lot of experience with, but I know that a lot of coding is somewhat mechanical. There's an imagination part of it, but there's not always a lot of imagination involved with it. There's problem solving, but a lot of things that we do career-wise are very devoid of problem solving and requiring us to use a larger potential of our brain. It's a generalization. Obviously, there's always exceptions, and there's exceptions in every group. I've met lots of people that use larger potentials of their brain or that bring their imaginations with them to everything they do, but not many. It's just not the way of things. It's just not how we're educated. We aren't educated to use our imaginations in order to, solve problems or think of new ways to do things to be efficient. Oh, this is how it's done. We don't ask why it was done that way. I've encountered this in the medical field. This is how it's done. There's no explanation as to why. And if you find a better way, you're challenged because this is the way that it's always been done. So there's no thought to it. Somebody was told how to do the job. They do it even if it is detrimental or whatever because they don't know any better. And they don't think about why they're doing what they're doing. And that's the common state. To me, that's what I've encountered. It's just follow the line, do as you're told. This is how it's done, do not deviate. There's not a lot of room for you to exercise your brain in that scenario. So the main focus of Psi Ritual is to exercise your brain by visualization, focus, imagination, problem solving, and observation. Now, you don't really think of imagination as being a big powerhouse of the brain, but if you look at computer engineering, computer design, not engineering, but the way memory and data usage works, you have written word, which is visual, and it's pretty rote how we do it, words. So we think thoughts in words, and that's kind of like, not visual words, but it's similar to a printed word on a web page. So, you download a document, and that document is like 54 kilobytes, and it's like 50 pages. So that doesn't take very much. Then there's a photograph. A single picture takes more than the written word. Then you get into just speech, audio recording, and the audio recording takes like twice as much amount of data as the picture. Then you get into video where you have audio, visual, motion, the whole thing. And this takes up an exorbitant amount of memory space. And, you stream stuff and it's just draining data. It's just going through the kilobytes and usually an image is like, I don't know, half a gigabyte or less, don't pick me apart because of the numbers, but you get what I'm saying. And then you get to a video and it's 1 gig plus, So that's how our brains work. And if we're usually just on the printed page, we're not really accessing much data. If we start visualizing and like really seeing and feeling and being aware of what we're envisioning around us, this uses a lot more energy and exercises your mental faculties. It stretches your brain. As you absorb a new idea and you're turning it around and looking at the problem in your mind and just seeing it and seeing all the variables that could go into that problem, you're really exercising your mind. I've had people where I give them a simple visualization, and basically one example is, imagine all of the cells in your body. There's millions of blood cells pumping through your body. Skin cells, the numbers are mind-boggling, and you think of the human body and then you compare the planet to the human body and all of the living creatures, plants, animals, insects. I count us as animals, so don't expect that. Not to mention, the motion of molecules of water, and compare those living creatures to the cells of our body. You know, like wolves or white blood cells are looking for weakness and disease. Um, Humans are like brain cells, and just visualizing the earth as if it was a human body with all these independent cells working together in harmony. This simple visualization has made people's brains hurt. They've absorbed the information, had a moment of wow, and then they're like, oh wow, that makes my brain hurt to think about. I I don't think that should make your brain hurt. I don't think imagining these complex things should make a person's brain hurt. I think we, as a society, should be able to visualize these concepts, and so the purpose of Psi Ritual is to discover the self, exercise your mind, not just your brain, but your brain is interwoven with your mind, and to help us focus on a task. And I will get into later how all of these things come together, the specific little bits and pieces of Psi Ritual, but I just wanted to cover that it's not craziness. It almost has nothing to do with deities or religion at all whatsoever. It can, and such things can give you purpose. I'm not dismissing them, but not everybody has that deity in the sky or universal oneness. But I think over time, as you delve into Psi and the self, and you experience yourself in connection with the rest of the reality, that it's hard to not see how we are interconnected. Whether or not our interconnectedness amasses to a mass being that many people term God is a different story. You can just look at it as oneness with nature and everything around you, or you can incorporate whatever religion that you have in order to understand yourself and the world around you, and to tap into those different forces, be they purely psychological or external. And that's the other aspect of Psi Ritual that separates it from daily ritual. Daily ritual you generally know the source of. OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, is a little different because there's a lot of rituals that are done out of compulsion, hence the name, that tend to be empty or are rooted in something that's so buried that their meaning has been lost on the person doing them. When it comes to Psi Ritual and pushing those boundaries into religion or science, which to me is a new religion, but that's besides the point. When you're pushing those boundaries, it becomes difficult to tell if it's purely psychological or if it is external. My experience leads me to believe that there are some external factors, but there are many internal factors. The point is, when you do a Psi Ritual, it does not matter whether it is internal, external, or a blending of the two. What matters is the results that you get from the practice. And again, I'll re-emphasize that if for no other reason than to increase your mental capabilities, your focus, your personal discipline, your personal understanding, if for no other reason than that, Psi Ritual is worth the effort to do so, because this will increase your abilities throughout the rest of your life. Whether it's teaching your kids something or finding a better way to do your job so that wow, now my job is easy. This means I have more time to spend in my own mind or more time to spend with my family. So these are all the little aspects that people just push aside to keep going through the drudgery of what other people tell them to do, instead of learning how to understand and focus on yourself and how basically you can best serve yourself and your community at the same time, because it's a symbiotic relationship. You're interlaced with those people around you, but maybe you don't believe that. It's difficult not to realize how dependent we are on other people, but we lie really well to ourselves. And I'll go into a story about that another time. But so that is the purpose of Psi Ritual. Thank you for your time. I'm Nobody. Take care.